to really question this thing that is an unmitigated good, I think, or it is assumed to be an unmitigated good anyway, we're going to take that apart pretty thoroughly, is really remarkable. And it's really striking to get into the gritty details of how that, she calls it trust tuning in the book, how people essentially, accept garbage and metabolize it to continue trusting people. It's striking, it's sad, it's really fascinating. It's a really good book, so I'm glad to be
Okay,
here.
yes, we are like trust. Maybe it sounds good, but also like let's break it down and think about what it means and what actually is underlying that. And it's that we need to be always taking risks. Why do we need to always be taking risk? Who can absorb risk? And I think so. I think that that's a key part is really kind of looking beyond the word trust, and getting to like what it's actually structurally doing for us in the economy. We're at this almost that felt like an inflection point. That was like, okay, a lot of employers were pulling on this like reservoir of trust in that moment. They were asking people to literally put their lives on the line, very much like the miners, like service workers come in and actually put your lives on the line. For professional workers, it was, completely redo the work that you're doing, like reformat it, create in your office at home, like all of this stuff. And then, 1 to 2, 3 years later, they got rewarded with layoffs, return to work mandates, et cetera, et cetera. And I do feel like that kind of betrayal, that kind of mass betrayal, um, opens an opportunity. But it is it's why not a foregone conclusion. Like books like these are really important at this particular time because it kind of gives us a language to call out stuff that maybe was going under the radar before, right? Like I said, like I say about in the book all the time, like it's something we're taking for granted as a good that is actually maybe eating away at our soul a little bit, and
Around
contributing.
them, the story of the restaurant worker who was fired for comping too much, right? And then the coworkers organizing to like get him money. That moment where you lose the trust in your boss but keep the trust in the people around you is potentially where unions are formed.
At home. And I think part of the return to work mandates is an awareness of that kind of loss of a grip on the worker, that kind of social and emotional grasp on the worker. That being said, there's a lot in terms of trust in numbers that we've seen with the rise of metrics and like how that can go awry. And so you could have that kind of go two different ways, right? You could have a fragmentation, and I saw this a little bit in the ride hail space where all of a sudden, instead of this kind of objectivity of numbers, you see people starting to question the numbers and say, oh, there's 2 or 3 different ways of reading these numbers or this data, which is great. I think that kind of, even though it hasn't been great in political life, that kind of fragmentation of truth, in this particular space, it actually created an opportunity for organizing. But in the ride hail chapter, I really grappled with: do I try to save trust in this chapter, or do I argue for something else? About it. And I actually argue in the ride hail sector, I ended up falling or focusing much more on solidarity, which instead of this, and yes, of course they are related, but instead of this focus on accepting vulnerability, it's much more focused on collective action, collective experiences. He describes, he uses the word trust. Even like, but it's not that emotional trust. And what he goes on to describe is actually what I would call solidarity, because it was much more based on action, based on shared circumstances, and shared experiences. And so I think optimism, trust, these are all things that are very future oriented, which distract from the current circumstances.
And,
and
see
so
this a lot with union political endorsements of like, well, we're going to endorse this person and hope they do something for us.
It is, we do kind of hear like automation technology as this kind of only creating bad conditions. And I did see this like very slight counter. That doesn't mean that that is what's going to be possible in the future. But it does mean that it's not a foregone conclusion. And I think it does mean that the more interesting question in my idea is, what is the space for like workplace betrayal in the future? Because I think that there is, I think workers have been betrayed for quite a long time. And I think that to be able to use that betrayal as a form of like kind of consolidating anger, making that anger useful, mobilizing, I actually think that that could be really, really powerful.